And this is a real treat for the audience, right? I'm joined by Candace Ashby, Chief Doctor Candace Ashby. When you gain both title Chief and Doctor, do you have a preference? I feel like if I was a doctor, I would demand everyone called me a doctor all the time.
Right. It sounds cool. I mean, it's like, well, you earn it and you take all these years of your life and money and stuff to get to earn the title of doctor. But then once you get it, you don't care if anybody calls you a doctor at that point. You finally achieve the pinnacle. But it was funny when I got it. I went a couple of years before my battalion even knew I was a doctor. Somebody saw it on an advertisement. They're like, Chief, you're a doctor. I'm like, I know. It's freaking crazy, isn't it? You know?
Yeah. Well, that reason, your humbleness in being a doctor is probably exactly the reason why I'll never be one. But it's okay. It's pretty amazing. A doctorate in management, in organizational leadership, right? Yes. What a title.
I know. It's a mouthful.
So 30 plus years with Indy. Battalion Chief there now, the president of Key Fire Investigations, Elite Public Safety Consulting, speaker extraordinaire. Like I was just saying, not to put too much pressure on your shoulders, but someone I respect a lot on the job told me the best they've ever seen in presentation. And so no pressure here, but I do expect that level of performance today.
Well, they put their standards really low. They've ever seen. But yeah, a lot of the people, I catch them off guard because I don't speak doctor. I speak fireman. And a lot of presenters try to stay PC, and I don't. I just speak like I'm sitting at the firehouse table. And most people it resonates with. Some people, they get offended by the curse words, but
you let them fly today. It's okay.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, and we will get into that. Obviously, you have a storied history in terms of we share this high accomplishment, but also not without our turn on the other side of the discipline table. So one thing I appreciate about someone that goes to war for the right things in the fire service, very often we end up ruffling some feathers, but I think that's okay because I think that's how change happens.
Yes.
All right. So before we get into all that fun, I do want to roll it back to little Candace before all the accolades. Why the fire service? What's childhood like? What's like the upbringing like to get you to this point where someone would be interested in running into burning buildings?
Oh, well, it wasn't my upbringing. Let me tell you, I was raised by older parents. So in my generation, I was raised by the greatest generation, where most of the kids that I went to school with had younger parents. I didn't. My dad was almost 50 when I was born. So he was very old school. Now, I played a lot of sports when I was growing up, and my dad was, both the parents worked in factories, and he would tell me, you can't make a living bouncing a ball. Of course, I always had a dream. I wanted to make a living bouncing a ball, but he said I couldn't do that. I actually had to work, and I had my first job like at 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
It was, you're going to work. Yeah, we didn't have a whole lot. It was, if it's brown, flush it down. If it's yellow, let it mellow. We didn't even flush toilets because every time we flush a toilet, it cost money. So I was in a very frugal household. I thought when I was young that I wanted to be a cop, and not just any cop. I wanted to be a cop on a horse, because my dad was, he basically raised me in a horse racing track. So we were all over. He was a huge gambler, and we went to horse races all the time. Well, I wanted to be a jockey, and I outgrew that in kindergarten. So, and then I was like, I'm just going to be a cop on a horse. So I didn't want to sit in a cubicle. And I got arrested when I was 16 years old at the homecoming game for drinking and smoking a joint. Oh. And I ended up being put in a tank, a juvenile tank, for 3 days. And when I came out, I had community service. And the community service was I had to wash the police cars at the fire department. So during those 100 hours, I didn't like being a cop at that point. I was like, screw those cops, because they arrested me. And I saw the firemen having loads of fun. I was 16 years old, and I got to join as a cadet. And once I joined, and that was it. It was over. I knew what I was going to do for the rest of my life was the fire service. And so that started a little over 40 years ago when I started out. And then going back to the way I was raised, my dad was absolutely 100% against women being in the fire service. He was very much a male chauvinist, and he thought women ought to be pregnant and sitting in a dishpan and serving their husbands at home. And that's the way I was. So I was raised in a very strict household like that. So I had to get through him when I got onto the fire department. So anything I ran into in the fire service, was nothing after getting through my dad. Now, eventually he came around and knew that this is what I wanted to do with my life. And he was very proud of me. And then I ended up taking care of him as his primary caregiver for the last 20 years. So he was very proud of the fact that I joined the fire service, and I was there to help him and things before he passed away. So that's kind of how it happened when I joined. But then I was on this volunteer department, as a cadet at 16, and then I got voted on. But in Indiana, you had to be 21 to go career. So I had to wait until I was 21, and then I went career on the south side of Indianapolis at a small department that was named Perry Township, because Indianapolis is surrounded by townships. And they slowly, in 2007, started absorbing each township around. So I was part of a merger. So I started out full-time at a 4-station department. There was about 120 of us. And then we merged into Indianapolis in 2009. So now I'm a battalion chief in Indianapolis, but I wasn't raised in Indianapolis. I was raised on a small department. So that's what it makes it very unique as I go around and speak, because I still have a small department mentality up here, even though I'm in a big city urban fire department. So it's kind of cool because it's cultures within cultures. And it's just a different way of thinking about stuff, but I have a lot of fun.
I have multiple follow-ups. Let's go right to that though. So that small town mindset brought to the big city. Mm-hmm. What does the small town do better, and what does the big city do better?
Well, I'll tell you what the small town does worse. And they're all worried about what everybody's doing and who everybody's screwing. And they need to stop, because there's things that's not in their control anyway, but they have a tendency on a small department to eat their own. And they're so caught up in the politics and the day-to-day operations, where in a big city fire department, these guys come in to do their job every day. They could care less what's going on in the Enchanted Kingdom at headquarters. They don't care. Does it affect us? It surely does. But they're in to do the job for each other. So the biggest learning curve that I had in going from a small department to a big city was brotherhood. Because it wasn't until I got to the big city that I understood actually what brotherhood meant. And I wasn't exposed to that because there was too much cutthroat. There was too much of this, everybody worried about what everybody else is doing. It's like, just stop, there's a story that I tell when I'm on the road that I was treated differently because I was a straight woman, where the other women coming in were predominantly gay. And so I got accused of screwing everybody in the administration because I was a straight one. And I'm like, gosh, stop. And I was married at the time. And I got pregnant, and the guys had 7 different people pegged as the father of my child. Not one of them was my husband. And I'm like, seriously, this is that what I call the small department mentality that will tear an organization apart if it's let to do that. Where in a big organization, you still got some of the same issues, no matter if you're big or small. But it's the mentality of the people and how they're brought up and what's allowed and what's not allowed. And when you get into the busier big city department, you're making more runs, more people are together, they have each other's backs. You get into smaller ones, there's not as many runs, so people get caught up in small town politics, and they shouldn't. So that's one of the bigger learning things that I've learned from small department to big department. I call it small department mentality, large department mentality. And there's still issues at large departments. Not everything's great, don't get me wrong. But I've seen smaller organizations go from volunteer to part-time, and they had a greater love and respect for each other than a big city fire department at the slowest firehouse. Because one of the things that I always hear is, well, don't make as many runs, you have more time on your hands. That is true. And it's what do you do with that time? Now, you can certainly bash each other and tear each other apart, or you can have just the opposite effect where you guys could go out, play horseshoes, cornhole, pickleball, really bring that brotherhood together. So I've seen a smaller fire department that comes up against Indianapolis, and they have got the best brotherhood and togetherness. And they're a small department that don't make a lot of runs. So I'm like, it's not the run load, guys. It's the mentality up here and what's allowed to happen. And I think that's where you get into the differences.
I think it's interesting because, I'm not exactly, you could tell me, how large is Indy?
We have a little over 1,300, 44 stations. Now, in my battalion, I have 7 stations, 60 firefighters, and 15 officers under my command.
Okay. So like where I work is about 470 people, 16 stations. But the way see it, or the way I've personally experienced it, is that it's almost this weird meld between big and small. We have enough people that I don't know all my coworkers, but at the same time, it's almost like, 40 individual fire departments, because each station has its own culture and its own rumor mill and its own, training schedule and its own. But then you also have this larger umbrella that covers the culture of the entire. And then I guess this progresses into, at a certain point, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you would know, in one of these smaller departments, you almost have this one hive, right? From the fire chief down to the newest person, it's one community because there's only 25 of them. And then at a certain point, it becomes us versus them, which was a very different dynamic when I came in, because I came from the part-time side and the paid on call side, where all of a sudden you're in this station and you're like, well, it's our shift versus the other shift versus, and versus might not be the right word, but it's us. And then we have the royal us, which is our station, but then all of the street is kind of adversarial to administration, which is adversarial to the city. And so if you're trying to like navigate a culture and, hopefully make it for the better, it feels like there's too many facets. There's too many like spinning plates to try to even know where to start. How does someone go about pushing this whole organization in the right direction when there might be 40 different mini organizations that can't even agree about who they are and what they want to be?
Well, that's where you hit it right on the head. So we're worried about individuals and individual training and officer development, which we should be. There needs to be that. But the bigger picture is, where does the organization benefit from this? And this is a lot of the places that I go as I travel the country. And I'm like, okay, it's great that you're bringing me in as an outside educator to come in and do this one-on training for your people. But when do you get a return on your investment as an organization? So we have to get the bottom, which is the majority of the organization, to understand it's not the top that controls the organization. It's the bottom. It's the lieutenants and the captains. They set the culture. So just as you said, you have 40 different fire departments running around. Well, somebody, which is normally the operations chief, is supposed to make sure through standard operating procedures that we're going out and those 40 different stations or different crews are all operating the same on the fireground. The problem is because we don't have accountability, and I'm not saying discipline, there's a difference. We don't have accountability in the fire service, and we suck at communicating with each other, and nobody's getting anybody on the same page. So everybody's out here doing their own thing. And that's why we have 40 different fire departments. And then the people that shoot up to the top, they don't even know. And so they have this breakdown of communications. And just exactly what you said, it is nothing but a battleground. Everybody thinks they're the best ship, the best station. It never stops. You got the us versus them, which is the mentality between administration and the operations level. I think there's a disconnect in most of them. And that disconnect is communications. The top don't listen to the bottom, and they need to start listening to the bottom. And the bottom needs to shape up as well. So that's when I decided to go out and try to communicate the truth to everybody on what's really killing us in the fire service. But I have to go in and go against what people have been trained to believe their entire careers, which it's lay it on the fire chief and the administration. And I'm like, guys, stop. What's really killing us is when we go in and we throw each other under the bus and we stab each other in the back. And until you get that under control, you're never going to fix your fire department organization. But we have to look at the organization and how do we move that organization forward? Because it doesn't matter if you're the fire chief or if you're the lowest person. We all want the same thing, a better fire department. But we don't have the first clue and how to be on one team to make that happen and move that entire organization forward, because we're so battling each other, and tearing each other apart, and then we can't go anywhere. And that's what has to be addressed in the fire service.
I've heard you say in the past that there's no such thing as an organization. There's just a bunch of individuals.
That's what an organization is. It's a bunch of people under the umbrella of that organizational name, and people are not perfect. So if you're led to believe just change out the fire chief and everything's going to be great, whether you agree with your fire chief or not, that's up to you. But my thing is, if you don't like them, what are you doing to change it? Because every single day you come in the doors, you're mentoring the future lieutenants, the future captains, and future chiefs. And what are you mentoring them to do? Now, if it's like traditional fire department across this country, you're mentoring these kids to come in and say, why'd you get a job here? Our administration sucks. I can't stand this place. I only got 292 days left until I retire. And when these kids are listening to that from the peers, what are they supposed to do? Do you blame them from getting up and running outside the door? You know, but all they do is they come in the firehouse and they learn how to blame somebody else for everything that's wrong besides look in the mirror and say, hey, what can I do to make it better? So we've got to start tackling the truths of the fire service. And what I've come to believe after 40 years is we're like a bunch of spoiled, rotten little brats. That is like a kid in a store that wants a candy bar and his mom tells him no, and he throws himself on the ground and he throws a little tantrum until they give in and hand him a candy bar. And then if you're standing there and you're old school enough, you're like, pick him up and bust his ass. How's that? We're going to stop to this right now. Ain't nobody busting anybody's asses out here in the fire service. So when I go around and speak, I do tell officers, some of your people need to be loved and hugged because they do a terrific job. And there's another subset of your people that need a big freaking paddle. If you go in there and start laying into these people and say, quit acting like a freaking turd and stand up and act like a man that you're supposed to be, or a woman, instead of a spoiled, rotten little freaking brat that didn't get their way. And we have gotten this mentality where everything is an entitlement today. And it's sad but we have put ourselves in that position. So the people at the top come from the people at the bottom. If you don't like the top, guess what? They're a product of the environment that you have allowed to happen. So when do you take responsibility for that and say, ho, I don't think we're doing this right, because I think we've all worked for bad officers. I know I've had my fair share of bad officers. Now as a battalion chief, I'm like, oh, guess what? I'm over 15 officers. Guess what they're not going to do? They're not going to treat their people like shit because I won't allow it. And the thing about the fire service is everybody has a boss. So if you have a bad boss, where in the hell is their supervisor at? And why is their supervisor allowing it to happen? Why don't they put their foot down? So one of the movements I'm trying to create in the fire service is that we need better bosses. And not just better bosses, we need bosses with balls to stand up to the Mickey Mouse stupid shit and put a stop to it, because this is truly the greatest job in the world and we're killing ourselves with just stupid shit. Firehouse drama.
I heard you talking to Corley on while I was kind of gearing up for this, and in him, you were talking about how like the fire service has this servant leadership culture of like, oh, we're gonna come from under and support you, and that's how we're gonna guide the ship. But you both pushed back on that, which I totally agree with, which is this idea that eventually somebody has to stand for something and have some accountability. We can't just constantly be serving. Like there's no room for servant leadership on the fire grounds, maybe afterwards, but maybe speak on that. I think that it's such a good point. And in this ever, you also coined this term, or I don't know if you coined it, but I love it. I'll give you credit. The pussification of the American fire service, which I love. But it's true. In an environment that we can't be that way, right? We cannot be that way on the fire ground. The stakes are too high. How does the modern fire officer enforce the rules they must enforce, but also keep employed,
So you're unpacking a lot of stuff. And let me try to bring this into where somebody can understand it, because anybody that's truly servant leader, they're going to immediately be turned off by the fact of, oh, don't be a servant leader. Not saying that. Servant leadership is the number one leadership style out there because it's about serving other people. It's not about you. It's about what you can do for the growth and development of others. The thing is people that teach servant leadership has done it such a overwhelmingly good job is they've got people believing out here the only type of leader they can be is servant leader. That's the only one. None of the rest of them matter. And it's like, stop. No, you need to be a servant leader 90% of the time. But there's 10% of the time that you're not a servant leader. You need to put your hat on and become a manager. But yet we live in a world driven by social media. And this is where I said that the leadership movement in the past decade and a half has led to the pussification of the American Fire Service, because it's led people to believe, I don't want to be a manager, I want to be a leader, because you lead people, but you manage things. Yes, that is true, but you have to bring them both into balance. You have to be a manager and a leader, because the person that you are dealing with and the situation will dictate whether you're going to use management or leadership. You can't just say, well, I'm just going to be a leader and I'm just going to be a servant leader, because when you deal with a 10%er and that 10%er goes up to you face to face, says, screw you. What are you going to do, servant leader? Drop to your knees and wash his feet because you're a servant leader?
Yeah.
Like, no, now you're going to put your hat, turn it around to manager 101 and say, now you're going to do it because I told you you were going to do it. How's that? Is that the game you want to play? Let's play. Mm-hmm. And that's why the person in a situation dictate. It's not called incident leader. It's called incident manager, right? Because you don't have time in that fireground, in that moment of that firefight, to be a servant leader. Now, once the fire's over, absolutely, you can bring in tentacles of servant leadership if you want to help pick up the hose, okay? Not saying don't be a servant leader. Be smart. That is a tool in your toolkit that you have, you're going to rely on the majority of the time, but you have to have other things in your kit to be able to handle people. Because if you're only a servant leader, you will flat get your ass ran right over by the people that's going to read right through you, because they know you're not strong enough to stand up to them. And that's where we need the parent part to come out, because it's no different than being a parent and being an officer. We want to get along with our kids, but we want our kids to be good, outstanding citizens, right? And follow the rules and the laws, and we don't want them in prison and jail and knocked up with 15 kids and all that. So we have to teach our kids discipline and how to treat other people with respect. And somehow we've lost that in society, is the respect part, because there's a lot of disrespecting going on to each other. We're even disrespecting rank. And it's like, why is that allowed? Because somebody has allowed it. And that's where I think these people out here, I don't think everybody should have been hired in the fire service that was hired. This isn't a job for everybody, but we're just bringing them in by the truckloads now. Whoever has a heartbeat, here you go, here's a uniform. And they show that they can't do the job, or they show their hand in the first year, and we just keep them on. And not do that probationary firefighter thing anymore that, gosh, if you showed up later, you didn't shave, you were fired. Now, these kids can do anything and still continue to keep a job. It's just amazing to me that we've lowered our standards and our expectations of serving the public. But that's kind of what I want to say on that. Unpacking the leadership and the management is we have to get out here. But where is a management 101 training? There isn't any, because everything wants to be leadership. Well, you got to have management 101 because that's a majority of what an officer does. And then you want to know why we're fighting. Well, I think this is where it's a fundamental training issue. Like, the number one problem of every organization is communication. But how many effective communication classes have you had in the fire service? And the fire service is notorious to say, you want to be a lieutenant, go take fire officer 1. You want to be a captain, go take fire officer 2. Across this country, that's standard. You tell me how many fire officer 1s did that class teach how to be a fire officer? It didn't, did it?
It's a lot of paperwork.
And then we wanted, so you can go through a class for a week, get a certificate at the end, says your name on it. By gosh, you're fire officer 1. Here's your badge. Go forth and succeed. You got the first damn clue what the hell you're doing. And you get out there and you screw it up. And then somebody else is waiting for somebody else to fix that screw up. And they go bury their heads in the sand. This person continues to get promoted. And then the rest of us suffer when they're a micromanager because nobody ever showed them, no, you don't act like that. So that's the difference that we can make in the fire service, that we can start grabbing a hold of these people, because I think they showed their hand early and say, you're going down the wrong road, honey. You need to switch your trajectory, and you don't go out there and treat people like this. I won't allow it to happen. If we had more bosses that do that, oh my gosh, we'd be off to the races and have a fire service, right? Yeah,
we would. One of the things that I see as you talk about that, people getting kind of rolled over, the most prevalent archetype that I see that happen with is the nice leader. The like, oh man, that chief is so nice, or that captain is so nice. But they leaned so heavily into, I'm going to be your friend, that all of a sudden now when they have to be your boss or they have to be somebody's boss, that shift from we're supposed to be playing cribbage together and having a joke to now like, hey, you have to change this or do this, or I have to actually tell you what to do. That gear shift is too difficult to happen. So how does a leader be kind and maintain amicable relationships, but also have the ability to give the feedback they need or apply the discipline that's necessary?
Well, first off, be a decent freaking human being. There's the first requirement, right? Understand why it is you do what you do and how you're supposed to treat people. But you also have to have a standard of expectations. And when your people cross those expectations or don't hold that standard, you got to be there to push them back inside the line. And when you let them go and they figure out that there's no boundaries, then what do you have? You got nothing but organizational chaos. And that's where the officers get ran over that are too nice because they can't stand up and say anything. And they need to. So I want to think, I'm biased, but I want to think that I'm one of the most laid back chiefs to work for. I really do. I just want to have a great time every single day. I love the job. I want to do it another 35 years. There's no way I even think about retiring at this point. I've got 36 years in. So I'm like, hell no, I ain't retiring. I love it. And I finally get it. It's take care of my freaking people, right? You get one of those 60 in my battalion that goes outside my boundaries and watch what I do. Yeah, I'm going to be there. I'm going to back right back in. Why? Because I take that personal. Don't make it look like I don't have control of my battalion. No. You can do that. Here's my expectations, and I have 5 of them, and I have 3 things that I will not allow. There's your rules. Go forth and succeed. Now, I'll do one of those rules. I'm going to be there to smack your ass back in line because that's my job to do.
And I would imagine the people that work beneath you appreciate that clear guidance and knowing exactly where their lines are.
Well, I hope so. And I think also that the key is that my people, I work for my 15 officers, first and foremost. They work for their people and their people serve the customer on the street. So I wholeheartedly believe that I am there for those 15 officers to make it their best life that I can give them. They need training, I'll give it to them. They need anything at all, I'm going to give it to them. But I'm also going to give them the room to make mistakes because that's how they learn. So that's how any of us learn, right? So I don't micromanagement things. But I want to say the key to it is the relationships that we build with each other, which is the whole key to leadership anyway, is using communication to build a relationship of trust. And once you have that relationship of trust, you can go a lot farther because you have influence over people. Meaning, I don't have to lay paper on my people. I don't take them in behind closed doors and shut my door and have a counseling session. Not to say I would never do it. There may be people that warrant that, but the majority, because I have this relationship of trust with my battalion, is I can say, hey, what was that? Pull your head out of your ass and act like you got some sense because you know I don't allow that in this battalion. Oh, sorry, Chief. That takes care of 99% of the issues I deal with is using candid, direct conversation. But I can't say that to somebody else in another battalion because we don't have that relationship of trust. They're going to go running right to city HR. Oh my gosh, Chief Ashby hurt my feelings because she cussed at me.
Yeah.
Right. But that's where the relationship and the trust come in that people in supervisory positions have to have with their people. And that's what you're wanting to gain because you want that influence over other people. But I'm telling you, I'm the luckiest battalion chief in the entire world because I am surrounded by absolute rock stars that make my job so easy that I don't have to do much of anything, but if I do make a correction, I'll make it and we'll move on. But just the same way I want them to do with me as well. My XO, I have a driver that's called an executive officer. If I do something she don't agree with, by gosh, she'll tell me. But it's behind closed doors and I may not agree with it at the time. And then after things calm down, it's like, shit, she's right. Because we have to have that feedback, both positive and negative, if we're going to grow and we're going to get better. And I'm far from perfect. I make all kinds of mistakes, just like everybody else makes mistakes. And we got to be humble enough to admit it when we make a mistake and say, hey, that was my bad. And we got to move on.
So you say you have the best, people that work beneath you. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the leadership above, or is it the people that need to be led? Or is it where does that dynamic come that the whole organization functions appropriately? And how does somebody kickstart that?
Well, that is where that needs to come from the top. And we do at Indianapolis have probably one of the best what I believe to be one of the best fire chiefs in the entire country when it comes to leadership and the way that he communicates and talks. And I can go into his office, ask for a meeting. If I send him an email or ask a question, I'm not afraid to ask anything. I'll go straight to the guy and ask, and he knows that, and he will give me an answer. He'll call me, he'll respond back, whatever. But I can go into his office and speak just like I want to speak straight to him. Now, would I do that in front of people? No, because I would never treat him around disrespect or even make it look like I was disrespecting. Not that I'm disrespecting, but a lot of times I come off very harsh when I'm trying to get my point across. And he'll listen to me, and he may not agree, but at least he gave me a chance to hear me out. Mm-hmm. That's why he's the fire chief. And there's so many people that can't handle that. First off, they want to go bury their heads in the sand and tell everybody else except go straight to the source and do that. And that's what I'm trying to show my officers. I actually bring the fire chief out once a year, and I set him down in front of all my officers and say, here's the guy. And then we'll remove all the layers. Here it is. He has an open door policy. I'm taking advantage of it and bringing him to the officers and saying, you guys have any comments, questions, concerns? Right there's the man. Do it respectfully. Mm-hmm. And showing them that even if you're unhappy about something, you can voice that. And there's a correct way to do it. And, and to have that line of communication and have somebody that's listening. But we got a tremendous fire chief, to answer your question, that will actually listen to what we have to say. Whether he agrees or disagrees with it is not the point. But he will listen. And that's what we're missing in the fire service, because we won't talk out on the street if we don't think somebody's listening to us, or we get frustrated because nobody's listening. And we got to have that communication. Listening is a part of communication. So we have to have people in management and leadership positions that listen to other people. But we also have to have people that are not in management and leadership positions that listen to the ones that are. And we need this two-way communication and relationship so we can understand where both of us are at. So it's a difference in being in the admin and being on the street. We look at life in the fire service through two totally separate lenses, but we can't empathize with the other one. And that's what's really sad. So we revert to fighting with each other, the us versus them mentality and things like that. And I'm like, guys, just stop. But I don't think we're looking at it in the right way. And when you got officers that are at the bottom that haven't had the training that they need, the accountability, the conflict management, the communication, where do you think the people at the top got it? They didn't. So when you let the problems rise to the top, what the hell do you think is going to happen when it gets to the top? Is it any shock that it winds up in city HR? Is there any shock when somebody winds up with paperwork, grievances are written, when it all could have been handled through having an adult conversation at the lowest freaking level and having an officer that says, no, you're not going to act like that here. This is why I think the company officer is more powerful than any fire chief in this country, because they have the power to walk in a firehouse where somebody's sitting around and complaining and whining and crying and saying, shut the hell up, because I set the tone of this firehouse, not you. Where's that at? It's not that they're not listening. They're just not allowing the whining and crying and the negativity and the toxicity to rip their firehouse apart. And we don't have officers that are minding that. Now, I do think that starts from the top and comes down. However, if you have a top of the organization that doesn't listen, or they're toxic or whatever, which I've worked for organizations like that as well, we can't use that as an excuse, because it has to start somewhere. So maybe it starts at the battalion level. Maybe it starts at the captain or the lieutenant level. But freaking start it. Quit sitting back and saying, I can't do it because we got a piece of shit administration. Stop. This is what you got to prevent. Don't worry about the ones that are there. Worry about the ones that are going to replace those guys. And what are you doing to say, don't act like that person right there? I want you to be better than that. So when you get in that position, you take care of us out here, because you listen and you empathize.
Hey, gang, if you could do me a favor and just like it, subscribe it, do all the things that the internet wants you to do, and me too. If you follow the show on social media, I appreciate it. Share the show, share the posts. The viewership makes a huge difference, and the viewership makes me feel really warm and fuzzy in my heart. And so I appreciate that. This podcast is brought to you in part by Pikes Boots. You can tell a lot about a brand by the way they choose to advertise. And Hikes didn't ask me to say anything specifically. What they did, they sent me some boots. They sent me a pair of the Fire Eagle Air and the Fire Eagle Extreme. These are structured fire boots. There's a pull-up boot and there's a lace-up boot. And, I was skeptical of the lace-up boot at first, but honest to God, you pull this one handle, tightens around your calf and around your foot, and it's so comfortable. I've been wearing them for a few months now, and, I can't say enough about how comfy they are. So if you want to find out more information about it, check it out at hikesusa.com. That's HAIXUSA.com, or check the show notes for the direct link. Rigaku. Today's episode is brought to you by Rigaku Analytical Devices, which are the folks that have been perfecting the 1064 nanometer Raman longer than some of us have even been doing hazmat. And they just launched their 4th generation handheld analyzer, the Icon X, which is built specifically for real world problems that hazmat teams deal with. We're talking about dirty powders, mixed materials, dyes, colors, all the things that make other instruments throw a tantrum. The 1064 nanometer laser means reduced fluorescence, so you get fast, reliable chemical ID in under a minute. Instead of staring, how about staring at a blank screen, wondering what went wrong? And this platform isn't just an upgrade. It's a whole new toolbox. It supports new accessories, including standoff analysis, so you can get the answers without getting too close. If you want an analyzer that's evolving right alongside the hazmat world, check out Rigaku's newest Raman at rigakuanalytical.com, or check the show note for that direct link. Back to the show. I hope you enjoy it. Candace is awesome, right? Isn't it crazy? She's amazing. Check it out. Bye. You said earlier, and I've heard you say it before, that you want to run a battalion that allows mistakes.
Yes.
I agree with you in this idea that we learn most from our mistakes. But you also have a quote that I want to unpack a little bit more, which is you talked about allowing these mistakes and then working to correct them, mentoring somebody. And at a certain point, if they continue to make the same mistake, they've made a decision. Yes. And I love that idea that you give them the mentorship, you give them all the tools to solve the problem. But at a certain point, if they don't heed the advice you've given them or the training, they've made the choice to go against it. So talk to me about that. And then how does somebody deal with that problem?
That's a lot. So first off, that didn't come from me. That came, there was a quote that I saw on LinkedIn, and I'd have to look it up, but right off the top of my head, I want to say the chief's name is Chief Brown, and he's the police chief of the Port of Galveston, Texas. And I want to say it's Ken Brown. And he puts out this quote that you couldn't even say it any better than what he says. And he goes, we have standards, and people apply and they want to come and work for us, and they know the standard. And if they don't know it, you're to train them, and give them everything that they need. But at the end of the day, if you've given them everything that they need and they make a decision that they're still not going to follow it, then they made their decision. Mm-hmm. And they'll see their behavior will see them right out of that organization. But that's a decision that they made, because their decisions have consequences. And I'm butchering it, but I absolutely fell in love with that, because I was like, where is that accountability? Now, when I got hired in the fire service, that was there, and it was called your probationary year. And like I said, show up late or don't shave, you're gone. There was no ifs, ands, questions, buts, nothing. Now I'm hearing these kids are late multiple times. They're unshaven. It is all this stuff. They calling in sick. I wouldn't even have thought of calling in sick in my probationary year, because I would have been scared to death of being fired. And it's just amazing that we've lowered our standard to that. And then we want to know what's wrong with the fire service. Well, the accountability piece, which is what you're talking about. Accountability is the intersection between expectation and action. And we look at accountability as discipline. Well, we have become a culture of punishment, not accountability. So there's a difference between discipline and punishment. And punishment is short-term corrective action. You're not going to do this because there's going to be consequences for that. We're going to correct that behavior right now. That's when punishment is warranted. Then there's discipline. Discipline's long-term. We could use coaching. We can use mentoring to turn somebody around to say, go down this path. This is what you need to do. And we're creating that discipline along the way. Well, every department in this country has a standard operating procedure that says, I guarantee you, I'm just throwing this out there. You will have a spotter when you're backing an apparatus. And we all have that same policy. You got to have spotters.
Yeah.
Has there never been a backing accident in your department? Sure there has. Where the hell's the spotters at? Well, there weren't until the report's made, and then there was 15 of them around the apparatus back into shit, right? Yeah. And it's because we're a culture of punishment, and we have gotten very good as firefighters at covering that shit up so that we don't get punished instead of it being. So we have people out there that say, well, I don't want to micromanage my people. I'm not a micromanager, so I'm going to let them do what they want to do. Well, that might not be a micromanaging moment. That might be a mentoring moment. There's a difference in micromanaging and mentoring somebody, especially the younger kids. Now, where I'm at with the mistakes is I make mistakes all the freaking time. I'm not perfect. I step in shit just like everybody else. Well, so do my officers. But our expectations to these young kids today, through risk management, which I get, is if you go out and make a mistake, you could cost somebody their life. Yeah. Right? So you have literally caused paralysis of most of our young officers because they're scared to death to make a decision because they're going to get punished for the decision that they make. And that is an absolute tragedy that's happened in the fire service, but I've seen it. I've felt it. I've gotten in trouble too. And it's like, nobody wants to get in trouble. So we'll just eliminate getting in trouble by just not making a decision at all. Well, you've got to have somebody out there on these scenes making decisions. And if it's the wrong decision, they have to have an ability to correct that so that they don't go down that road again. So the example I use is I had a 3-story apartment building vacant that was on fire. And the first engine on the scene didn't hit a hydrant. Well, we have a policy that you hit a hydrant forward lay. And if you get there and you don't, then you're going to reverse out. We have 2 hydrants on every fire. After this fire got put out, I went to this apparatus to this lieutenant and I ripped him up one side and down the other because he did not hit a hydrant. And I'm saying it from a perspective, you just screwed 2 other pieces of equipment because they had to hit your hydrant because you didn't. When I got through chewing his butt, he said, "Can I talk?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "You're right, Chief. There was a hydrant at this corner and I saw the hydrant, but I told my engineer when I saw the fire to let's go down and hit the closer hydrant so that I didn't lay the 5-inch in the street and booger up, the ladders coming in." We get down there and we can't find the hydrant. And I'm like, oh shit, I got to do a size up. So I did a size up saying we weren't on a hydrant. And then this apparatus was hitting it from the north. This apparatus was hitting it from the south. And he goes, "I really thought there was a hydrant there." Well, I put myself in that moment in the front right seat. And I could see making a decision that there was a closer hydrant, go hit it. And then get down there and there wasn't. So my XO and I were out at 2 o'clock in the morning with a flashlight looking for this hydrant. Sure enough, on the map, it showed a hydrant in this location. He didn't even look at a map. He just used a gut instinct to it. And what we found was a bunch of dead grass over top of a cap where the hydrant had been hit or taken out or whatever. The officer wouldn't have known that at the time, right? Yeah. So I had to go back and I had to eat crow with that officer because I should have never chewed his ass like that because there was a hydrant. He did make a decision. At that time, he needed to make a decision, but it wasn't there, right? So I had to eat crow and apologize for that. Then the same fire, I look down on the ground and I see a crew on an 1 3/4 hand line. Now, this was a 3-story vacant apartment building. We should have had 1.5 deuce hand lines, not 1 3/4. So I proceeded to say, who in the hell thought it was great to bring a knife to a gunfight? And the officer stood up and turned around and he said, "I can answer that." And I said, "And I'm waiting." And I was not nice when I said it. And he said, "We were the 3rd engine, but the 2nd one to hit a hydrant." So I left my guy at the hydrant. I told my backstepper to grab the 1 3/4 line because we had predetermined assignments. So our 3rd engine on a scene is extension. He said, "I knew there was an exposure to the north and it was me and one guy because I left my other guy on the hydrant. and I told him to grab an 1 3/4 line. We're going to hook it into the primary pumping engine and drag that line to the north side to get that exposure. So I had the maneuverability of the line, which is 2 of us. Mm-hmm. We get over there, we find out there's another engine already had an exposure line on the north side. So I pulled it back around because we were charged. I opened the bell and you come walking up. Now, was that officer justified of why he had an 1 3/4 hand line? Bet your ass he was. Yeah. But what did I see when I come walking up? A crew sitting on an 1 3/4 hand line. So I jumped the gun on that. Now, where I learned so much that night as a battalion chief is I did what I felt was right, which I ate crow again, and I went to that officer and I apologized because they were absolutely correct. But the one thing when I walked away from that scene that made me sick is that I don't want my people to fear me. And I've been with officers that are like, they chew your ass and stuff. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to make my chief mad or whatever. Yeah. But I went on those 2 days and it just tore me up one side and down the other. And I came back to work the next day and I sent an email out to all 15 officers. And I said, listen to me. You guys are out here. You have to make split-second decisions, whether you're right or wrong or indifferent. I will have more respect for you if you just make the decision, even if it's against policy. As long as you just make a decision and you're not scared of making a decision because you're scared of getting in trouble. I can't have, and this is what I said. I said it. The last thing any of us need is a battalion full of pussyfied officers that are scared to death to make a decision. Mm-hmm. So you're going to make mistakes and we're just going to have to work through it when it happens and hope that it don't end in injury or death, right? But you're going to make mistakes and we're going to correct those and move on, which is why I think it's very powerful that we do quick hot washes or PIAs at the end of every scene. While they're on the scene, I will get the first 2 engines, the first 2 trucks together for just 5 minutes and talk about if we had this same fire 5 hours from now, would you do the exact same thing? Or is there tweaks that we can make? Because there's always a way that we can learn and get better. Mm-hmm. But if we don't allow that culture that we are creating to have the leeway to make mistakes, then you're creating a culture that's scared to death of being punished. And I don't want that. So there's something in the psychological world that's called psychological safety. And that just means that we are not given a chance to speak up. And so people are scared to speak up for fear of retaliation and punishment. So we can't speak our minds. Mm-hmm. And that's so incredibly sad because we need to have that communication. When one of my people get frustrated, I want them to tell me that they're, what have I done? We've got to be able to talk our way through it. We're adults and be able to go forward. That's why I bring the fire chief out and I show them, guys, you're a leader of your people and you're a voice for those people and you need to be a voice for them and bring your concerns and go forth and just do it in the right manner. And even if you don't get your way at the end of the day, you don't give up. You get up the next day and you fight again because that's all we can do is keep fighting the good fight. But when we throw our hands in the air and say, why even try? They don't care. I don't care. I've tried to tell them they won't listen to me. And you give up. What are we going to gain from that? Mm-hmm. Besides, we're going to create this. We're just going to give up. And that's where we're at with this culture that we've created. And we've created the culture ourselves. We can't blame anybody but ourselves on that.
Mm-hmm. Man. So originally when we started out, I was like, we're going to talk about a biography. And then now we've gotten way off track, which is great because it's everything I want to talk about. But it's really funny. As I was just thinking, I was like, maybe I should try to go back to the biography. I was like, man, we've cooked through 45 minutes and we've got to, I was hired by a volunteer fire department. That's where we got. Oh, I guess we got to the merger. I lied. We got to the merger. Let's go back.
About me. I mean, I appreciate it and stuff. And I am who I am today because I've been around firefighters my entire life and they've made me who I am. So when people get offended by the way I talk, I'm like, hey, you guys made me. Right?
You did it. There is something that I want to talk to you about specifically inside of your career. So I do want to get a brief overview. So when the merger happens, are you still a firefighter?
No.
Or are you promoted?
I was promoted. So at Perry Township, I actually was an appointed battalion chief at one point. And then I got demoted prior to the merger and I went back to lieutenant. So I went from a tested lieutenant to an appointed battalion chief. And then I got demoted back to lieutenant. And then I was next on the list to captain and I went to a captain on a ladder company. When we merged into Indianapolis Fire, we then created the new position called Executive Officer, the driver of the Battalion Chief. And I went to the fire chief and I said, that's the job I want. I want to be the driver of the battalion. And he said, you're not eligible because you're a captain and that's a lieutenant's position. So I did the one thing the firemen don't normally do. I took my captain's badge off and I threw it across his desk and I demoted myself back to lieutenant so that I could come into Indianapolis driving a battalion chief, in which I did for the first 5 years.
Wow.
And within the first year, the rumor started that the XOs were going to captain rank. And it didn't happen for quite a while, but then I was like, I can't win for losing in this position. So then I had to go back through the process. I got promoted to captain prior to that position changing, which sent me roving through the city. And I wound up on an engine company for a few years and then tested for battalion chief. And then I got battalion.
One thing that you've been pretty outspoken about is that fact that you say you promoted too early.
Yes.
Why do you think that, despite the fact that you've had such success?
Well, I wouldn't say my whole career has been a success. It really hasn't. Now, it took me 30 years to figure out that my job is to take care of my people. Mm-hmm. Early on, I wanted to be this laid back, easygoing officer that everybody wanted to work with and work for. And I had no idea what leadership was about. I took every leadership class there was known. At the time, I read every leadership book like it was a destination that I was going to arrive at one day. Oh, I wanted to be this leader. And I got promoted between 5 and 6 years on a job. And the department that I was at, they trained me to believe if you were the last engine on the scene, you parked in such a way that you didn't get blocked in by the hose so you could be the first ones to leave. You heard that?
I've heard it.
Right. Everybody's heard that, right? That's how I was raised in the fire service. I look back at that now. When I was a young officer, lieutenant with 5 or 6 years on a job, do you know how many times a chief at a scene told us that we could go in service? And we're like, all right, freaking out of there. And we get in the apparatus, put our headsets on, and we're high-fiving each other because we didn't have to stay and pick up the hose. And we're blowing the exhaust on our brothers and sisters on the scene. Mm-hmm. Now, I perpetuated that by showing the young guys underneath me that this was an acceptable level of behavior and this is how we're supposed to do it because that's how I was taught. I look back at that now and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I didn't do anything to make the fire service any better. I actually made it worse because I got promoted too young and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Because I can tell my guys today, hey, you got your stuff, you can go in service. And they're like, okay, chief. And they go and they hit their in-service button and they grab their gloves and they come back to the scene and they don't leave until every inch of hose is off that ground. Not because they're told to, because they want to. Because they're there to serve each other and to help each other. And you won't have any of my companies leaving other companies on the scene to do anything. They will stay and they will help each other. And that's the learning that came from me going to a big city going, oh, is this what brotherhood is supposed to be? We're actually supposed to take care of each other and nobody has to tell us to do it. You know, we actually can think on our own and have our own. And then I was off to the races at that point of understanding. And that's one reason why I say I got promoted too young, because I had no clue what I was doing. And so I fostered this toxicity and this negative culture. And then I was negative as well. I was a 10%er when I was a lieutenant and a captain on the other department. Mm-hmm. That's one reason why I talk about the 10% and the 90% today is because I was there and I was down in a rut. And I didn't bring myself out of that rut for many years until we actually consolidated with Indianapolis. And that actually is what saved my entire career. So I was able to close the book on the first 19 years of my career and reopen it under Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. And it was off to the races. And the one thing that Indianapolis does that I was not a part of, but I actually cherish it because it's really, really cool, is their recruit classes. So they'll hire these huge classes of 60, 65, 70 people. And they'll put them through the 6-month academy. But these guys, when they come out, they have such respect for each other and they hold each other together. And this is the culture building part of Indianapolis where it starts with the young people. And I'm like, wow, that is really cool. Where the department I was hired at, there were 9 of us and we had like the biggest recruit class there was, but it was all we didn't have that level of respect or anything for each other. It was, as soon as we got out on the street, it was survivor. You know, everybody survived their own, and it was all, you eat your own and things like that. And it was really incredibly sad. But you don't see that in the big city, the way they run their recruit classes and things. And it's a very coveted thing that Indianapolis does that I think is just, it sets the tone for the rest of somebody's career. Not to say that there isn't people that need redirection down low, there is. And what I'm trying to do as a battalion chief today is to tell the officers and the senior firefighters, you guys cannot blame training and you cannot blame the hiring process for these kids. Once they get out on the street, we got to grab these kids and say, you don't act like that. You get your ass on this apparatus and we're going. And this, we got to teach them what that brotherhood and stuff is like. And we're always waiting on somebody else to do it. And that's the one thing that I've seen out of Indianapolis. It's the greatest thing ever.
So in an organization that has a fractured sense of that brotherhood, you know, I've asked this to past guests, and you've touched on maybe the reality of it, but you know, who is to blame? Is this an individual? Is this a company level? Is this a battalion level? Is this a citywide? Is it some faction of each one of those things? Is it like, I think that, like, as I talk to people across the country, I think you are in a unique circumstance in Indy where the brotherhood is alive and well. I think that there's components of it in a lot of organizations, but I like an organizational wide, you know, camaraderie, I think is less common, much less common. So, I mean, everyone wants that. I guess let me actually pivot here. Everyone wants that, right? Everyone comes into the fire service and is like, oh my God, I can't believe I got this job. I'm so excited. It's my dream come true. And then cut to 25 years later, they're a 10%er and they're bitching at the kitchen table because coffee used to cost a nickel and now it costs, you know, $2 or whatever the thing is. Or, you know, the billion complaints that come from that group. Why does somebody become that when nobody intends to be? Why does somebody count down the days to retirement when nobody intends to?
Well, a couple different reasons. The first one is I've watched too many of my brothers and sisters retire in this business because they're tired of dealing with the bullshit. Okay. And that's the internal politics part of it. Right. But my point is it only comes from a few. Now, Indianapolis is a great place to work. It honestly is, and that brotherhood, but do not mistake what I say. But it's a great place, and I'm painting this picture that it's ideal. Not everything in Indianapolis is ideal, okay? And there are cultures within cultures and shifts and different battalions and things that have the same issues as every other fire department in this country. We have a communication problem. We have accountability problem. We have people in key positions that shouldn't be in those key positions, okay? Now, they're there. What am I going to do about it? There ain't nothing Candace Ashby's going to do about that, right? Except make damn sure that the 15 officers underneath my command don't turn out like that. That is the job that I've been given. But also, I see now how much power, and not from a negative connotation, from a positive, how much power I have to continue that culture of Indianapolis within Battalion 1 on the B shift. Not every battalion is the same, okay, because we do all do our own things. But I see how much influence I have over these people and over the officers especially to make sure they run their stations how they're supposed to run their stations. And I try very hard to keep my thumb on the pulse of my people. And if there's a problem with an officer, that they give me a chance to step in and correct that problem before they all bail out on job bids and let me have a chance to work with them. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every battalion chief is like that in Indianapolis, because they're not. Some of them are absolutely checked out. But your question is, how did they get to that point? And I believe, one, they're tired of dealing with the bullshit. And two, that these people have answered to somebody that should have never got promoted. Now, I think that is a systems failure. not necessarily a people failure. Not everybody should have got promoted, but I don't think bad officers are bad people. Now, you have your anomalies that are your narcissists in one way, but it's just a very, very few. I think it's a fundamental training issue that they were never trained what the hell their job was. They went through Fire Officer 1, they were given a badge saying, here you go, take a few classes. They may or may not pick up 5% of what they sit through in a class, and that's depending upon the instructor or what the good quality classes that they have. And they're set out there to figure it out. Some figure it out, some take years, like me, to figure it out, and some never figure it out. But what do we do about the ones that never figure it out? Or what do we do about the ones that are going down the wrong road? We don't do a damn thing about it. We just keep promoting them until they get all the way to freaking headquarters, and then we're afterwards are suffering because of it, and saying that somebody should have seen this early and put their damn foot down and stopped it and said, no, you're going down the wrong road. Because most of the people that are like that are very book smart. And there are, and I'm just going to tell you, they can pass a test and they can say all the right shit, but their actions speak different than their words. And that's where the rest of us we see that, and we see that it's allowed, and it takes the love from the job. I don't think the 10%ers were hired in as the 10%ers initially. I think we all come in the same way. We're excited. We love the job. Somewhere along the way, somebody they have allowed that to rip that love of the job out of them, and it put them into a rut, and they can't get their ass out of that rut once they're there. That's the depression part. That's the toxicity part of the fire service. And then they start belly aching and bitching and pissing and moaning and whining and crying in the firehouse. And we have firehouse politics. We have all that stuff that goes on. And none of the officers walk in and put a stop to it and say, no more. We're not going to play those games. It's like every firehouse thinks they're the best house. Well, then you got those that can't fuel the apparatus. You got those that can't clean out a microwave on a kitchen detail. You got those that leave the glasses out around the cups at night. You have everything. You got the guys that fix brownies and lasagna, and they want to leave one piece in the pan so they can loosely cover it with aluminum foil and throw the pan in the refrigerator so they don't have to do the damn pan. Because they have no courtesy for the oncoming shift that needs to cook as well. Yeah. And that's just a disrespect that's allowed for each other. And then the thing about the fire service is this: we all have a boss. And when the bosses allow that to happen, what do you think is going to happen throughout the entire organization when the stations can't even get along? Every single firehouse has a boss. And if that boss isn't there, they have a ride-out boss. They should, or at least a senior firefighter. Why is that person allowing it? Why don't they say, no, stop. We're going to get along. We're going to treat each other with respect. Be a parent. Is this how you want your kids to act, like a bunch of spoiled, rotten little brats? And then we want to know where the toxicity comes from in the fire service. Well, the toxicity is only coming from a few, because I think the majority of the fire department is good people. I really do. And I think we all want the same thing. Some of us got lost along the way. I was one of them. I got lost for the first 19 years of my career. I was in a rut. I couldn't wait to leave. I was 20 and out, 25 and out, 30 and out. Now look at it. I'm in my 36th year, and I want to do another 36. Because I love the job more today than I've ever loved it. It's like, I finally get it. I finally get what this is about. And as I go across the country and I speak and I try to go out to get these guys stop stabbing each other in the back. This is the greatest job in the entire world. Come in and act like you're a good, decent human being. Because when you do that, you're not worried about stabbing your brothers and sisters in the back. Brotherhood comes from being decent human beings. Leadership comes from being decent human beings. That's where it starts. And we got to have more people that understand that leadership is about relationships of trust with each other, because there's not a better feeling in the world than one where your boss has your back. And there's not a worse feeling when they don't. That's the same thing goes for the brothers that you work with in the firehouse. When they have your back, there's not a greater feeling in the world. And when they don't, there's not a worse feeling in the world. When you can't trust the guy sitting beside you with anything that you say, they're going to run and tell somebody else. That's sad. That is really, really sad that we can't even keep our word. We can't do, and it's just, that's the toxicity. But again, I have to tell you, it's only from a few. So one of the things that I hope for is that I can go out and create a movement across this country to say, guys on the bottom, you guys control it. And when enough of you step up and control it, and you take the audience away from what I call the 10%, the negative naysayers, the whiners, the bitchers, the chronic complainers, the narcissists, take the audience away because they need an audience. And when you remove that, you will help change that person. Now, the person has to change themselves. We can't change anybody, but you're going to help that along because everybody wants to be part of something bigger than themselves. Take the audience away, and who's that person going to have to bitch to? Nobody. Mm-hmm. And they're going to start changing their tune, or they're going to see the area of their ways and move on and find something else that makes them happy. But I think in unpacking everything that you're trying to unpack here, this is where the toxicity lies. It's with each one of us. You come to work every single day. And excuse my French when I say this, but I'm going to say it because there's not a better way to say this as a firefighter than this right here. You make a decision every day you walk in the doors of that firehouse. You're either going to be a brother or you're going to be a buddy fucker.
Yeah. And
that's a decision that each one of us make by how we act, the attitude and the words and the actions that come out of our mouth and out of our bodies. Mm-hmm. Which one are you going to do? I had plenty of times that I have not been an angel in the fire service. I have thrown brothers and sisters under the bus. I have stabbed my fellow in the back. Mm-hmm. And I just choose not to do it anymore. And I see that the gravity of the impact that I can have by changing my freaking attitude and putting things in perspective. But I think as you get older, this becomes natural because we start losing people that are close to us. And then every person that we lose, it drives into us how important the people around us are, and it's not the things, right? So now we've got a bunch of senior guys in the fire service that need to know that we need to rely on each other, and this can be the best job in the world or it can be the worst job in the world, but it's what we make of that. And we got to start saving each other and changing our own mindsets and our attitude. And when that happens, no matter who your boss is that's above you, even if they could be the biggest piece of shit, it doesn't matter. You're not going to let that affect you. You're not going to let, there's one thing that I had to learn the hard way in the fire service is I thought who the fire chief was affected my happiness. There ain't nobody that dictates how happy my feet are but me. Every day I get out of that bed and my feet hit that floor. There's some big thing out here across the country saying, know your why. And John Maxwell, one of the biggest leadership gurus in the world, says, once you know your why, you will find your way. For me, that happened. I never intended to be a speaker or go out and profess anything, because I felt like a screw up most of my life. And I still screw things up. But I'm like, man, if you can be humble and you can be authentic and you can just be yourself and just go out here and say the truth, like, guys, knock it off. We're killing each other. Quit waiting on somebody to come in on a white horse to save your organization because it's never going to happen. It's up to us to save the fire service, each one of us. And if we're waiting on somebody else, it'll be the same department the day you left. It was the day you walked in the door until you want to make it better. And that's what all of us have to figure out, that it rests with all of us. Mm-hmm.
So do we ever see a Deputy Ashby, or do we see an administrative Ashby?
Well, okay. At this point in my career, no, I don't. I never had the desire to go in the office, but let me tell you why. Because it doesn't matter who's in the administration. We are going to tar and feather them. We are going to string them up, and we're going to pull back our slingshots, and we're going to hit them with rocks because they can't do anything right? It doesn't matter. One reason why I do not go into the administration is I tell people this, and I get calls across the country like, we need a fire chief, will you go? I'm like, are you kidding me? Why would I want to go in there and bust my ass day in and day out to make the organization better for every one of you, for every one of my peers, my brothers and sisters, to tell me what a piece of shit I am because I'm in the admin? Do we not do that to our people in the admin, no matter who it is? Yep, we sure do. And that's the stuff that's got to stop. Now, that being said, there is a part of me now as I'm getting older that I'm like, well, it'd be kind of cool to see if I could make real positive change. Because one thing that I'm frustrated about is people that lack the ability to make decisions because they're scared that they're going to make somebody mad. I crossed that bridge a long time ago. I don't go to work to make people mad. I don't go to work to make enemies. I want to be everybody's friend. But I'm also mature enough to know it takes two to have a relationship. And if somebody doesn't want to be my friend, that's on them. Okay. I would still, even if it's my enemy, they needed something. I can separate professional from personal, even if I don't like you, and treat you professional. There's a lot of people in the fire service, they can't do that bullshit. Most of them are in the administration. But I am so frustrated with people not making simplistic decisions to move an organization forward that I would like to give it a shot. I would like to go in there and say, I'm not scared to make a damn decision, and I'll make it. And if I make a mistake, I'll admit it, we'll correct it, and we'll move on. But the one thing is, you're not going to please 100% of the people 100% of the time. And the people in administration know that. And I think they kind of get stuck up where, they don't want to, cause waves and cause this. Well, you know what? Leadership's not easy, and you're going to cause waves, and you got to be okay with that. There's turbulent times, and there's times it's not so turbulent, but you wanted the big boy job. Now you got to get in there and you got to get after it, and you got to do what you can to get through those rough seas as well, and do it and bring people along for the ride. But as long as your people know that you're there to take care of them, and you build those relationships of trust, I think you're off to the races right there. I think that's sort of the difference that we say if it's fireman's fire chief, because it's people that we actually trust, that they have their best interest in heart.
So you've kind of in your career famously had your run-ins with admin.
Oh, I still do.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm still in trouble all the time.
Yeah. Which is, like I said kind of earlier, I think that someone's got to rattle the cages, right?
I don't
So I'll tell you as we barely know each other, I'm in the same boat. I'm very good friends with our admin now, but I've had my run-ins and I will continue to, and that's okay. But where is the line between towing the line and pushing the limit to make sure that we push our organizations in the right direction?
Well, I think there isn't a line to that. I think we all need to be questioning our policies and procedures. We need to be updating our operations, and we got to continue to grow and get better. And we got to go get out of our comfort zones in order to do that. The problem that I'm finding with me personally is because I challenge the thinking and I challenge things that are said, there's people in positions that can't handle that. They can't handle being challenged. They can't handle being questioned. And I don't do it disrespectfully, but I'm like, something's got to give here. And then all of a sudden I'm painted into being a problem child. And why? Because I'm not afraid to speak up. Now, like I said, I think it's a difference in intent and respect and disrespect. But they're not even giving me a chance. And it's just like, but you know what? I say what I say. I do what I do for my people. So I got my backs and my people no matter what. And I will go to bat for every single person in my battalion. And even if I don't get my way, I know when I laid my head down at night, I did everything I could for my people. And I get up the next day and I fight again. I never quit fighting the good fight and going forward and doing what I feel is the necessary things to move an organization forward. Now, a lot of times I don't get my way or I get in trouble and we go round and around and, here's another suspension. I'm like, okay, whatever, and let's battle. But it's like, I just had this conversation with one of our admin people. I said, I'm coming in here because we're going to have an adult conversation right now, because I feel like by the rules, can I file a grievance? You bet your ass I can. But why would I want to? Why not start out by having an adult conversation with another human being and saying, let's get to the bottom of this because something isn't right. Whether they agree or disagree, just hear me out and listen. But at the end of the day, they make a decision. And even if I disagree with it, at least I got to move on. There's too many of us in the fire service. We don't get our way or the decisions don't go our way. And we throw our hands up and we give up. And we stomp around like spoiled, rotten little brats. And then we become the negative naysayers. And we're like, oh, we try to tell them, we try to do this, and they won't let me have my way on this. Well, guess what? There's sometimes we're going to get our way, and there's sometimes we're not going to get our way. That's life, right? And adversity is going to hit us. Well, to make you stronger, as long as you can keep your focus and plunge right through that. because not everything's going to be a bed of roses and lollipops and freaking rainbows. Everybody has hardships. Every one of us has our own stories and things that's happened, and every one of us has made mistakes, and every one of us has suffered loss, and we're going along good, and something out of left field hits us and knocks us off track. Well, the whole thing is can we get back up and keep going? And are we doing it for the right reasons? And it's not selfishness. It's not one way. It's not, oh, look at me. I'm some great chief. No, it's not about me. It's about the growth and development of everybody in my battalion. But I am so lucky because I surrounded myself that are smarter than me, but with people. And that's going to help me. Where I was trained when I was young that I needed to be the smartest person in that circle, because that's the way that was projected to me. You got to have all the answers once you're an officer, and you got to have this. And it's created that micromanagement culture. And that's where the micromanaging comes from, because where's the classes on delegation? And it's not, that's why I said some officers get it and some officers don't. But we're trying to figure this whole thing out, this messy thing called life and leadership and supervision. And there's all these great books and classes and podcasts out here, but you really just got to go and you got to do the trials and tribulations yourself. But as long as you do it for the right reasons, you're going to be able to, I know my why. Every single day my feet come off the ground. I know it, and I know my way. And I'm going to do everything that I can to make the best positive impact that I can. Excuse me. But I also am realistic to know the day that my gear comes out of that locker, somebody else's gear is going to be in it the next day, and that department's not going to miss a beat, because every single one of us is replaceable. But it's what kind of an impact do we want to have while we're there? And we've got too many of us that are not making that impact, and we need to come and pick each other up and say, no, this is what this is about, is making an impact on each other.
Wow. All right. As we start to move to close here, I know we got to let you go at some point here. Give me the Chief Ashby hot take. What's your hot take in the fire service that you might be on an island, but you're willing to die on the hill?
Gosh, I don't even know where to land that one, because I've got a flood of 1,000 different things that went through my head. But I would have to say it's high time that we start taking care of each other. And we really, truly build the brotherhood. But that's by the way that we act and we treat each other. And it just shocks the shit out of me that we can go solve problems for Mrs. Smith, but we can't solve our own problems inside the firehouse. And that falls on us, nobody but us. And it's high time that we all take responsibility to that and be the adults, no matter what position you're in, and know that no matter the position, you absolutely matter in your organization. And don't let anybody make you believe that you don't matter because you're a probie or because you don't have rank or because you're not in the office. Bullshit. Every single person brings value to that organization, and we need more people to understand that and make the best impact that they can of themselves and the people that's around them, and we need to grow that. And I think we're winning. I think we're winning by watching all these conferences and these podcasts. I mean, I was just at Firemanship last week. The whole thing, faith, family, firemanship. Firemanship's a culture in itself, that we take care of each other, and everybody they all respected each other that were there. It's over 1,000 people. And being around like-minded individuals like that, there's not a greater feeling in the entire world. Why can't we bring that into our organizations instead of saying our organizations are screwed up? And they are, because it's people that don't understand how to run an organization. So let's start the training. Let's start getting the things in place, but understand that we're all part of the same team. And it don't matter where you're at. We all want the same thing. No matter if you're a fire chief or the probie, we all want a better fire department. At the end of the day, we just can't figure out how to work together to make that happen. And we need to start.
Yeah. All right. With that, I'll let you go. Tell the people where they can find information about everything you're putting out, where they can see you speak, stuff like that.
Okay. Well, I'm on several different podcasts. So if you go to YouTube and YouTube my name, Candace Ashby or Dr. Candace Ashby, I'm sure 1,000 podcasts will come up. I have a nonprofit consulting business in which I run, which is called Elite Public Safety Consulting. I have a Facebook page under Elite Public Safety Consulting. My personal Facebook page is Candace Ashby because my maiden name is in there in the middle. And you can look me up on the internet and find me. My email is my first initial last name. So it's cashby@elitepublicsafety.com. And I believe that this is much bigger than one person. So what I'm trying to do now is bring a team of people together under the nonprofit so that we can start tackling officer development training on a larger scale, to have multi-year contracts that we can do ongoing officer development training and start knocking this out of the park so we can grab a hold and start moving the culture from the bottom, and then we can move the entire organization forward in the future.
Wow. Well, thank you for all the work you're doing. It was, I feel like I'm just a sponge, just trying to soak up as much as I possibly can in terms of wisdom. Thank you for all you're doing for the fire service, and thanks for taking the time to chat.
Thank you. I appreciate you.